Over the years, watch size trends have changed. Decades ago, we saw brands such as Hublot lead the charge in offering these very large, chunky watches and selling a lot of them out on the market. Now, unfortunately, when the brands did this, this left many collectors that either had smaller wrists or preferred more traditional case-size watches really underserved. Now, thankfully, within the last 5 to 6 years, many brands have started offering watches under 40 millimeters in size once again. I myself am very glad to see this. Now, today, we're going to be covering 10 of the best watches that fit this category. These are going to be the 10 best watches that are 38 millimeters in size. Such a sweet spot, in my opinion. Now, before we do that, guys, please do not forget to check out delraywatch.com, where we buy, sell, and trade watches, and also my TikTok, The Real John P. Yes, my TikTok, The Real John P, where a little bit more candid content in things that are more short form and maybe not the best suitable for YouTube. And if this video that you're watching right now gets 5,000 likes in the next week, I will actually do one of those ridiculous TikTok dances that all the kids are doing. So rack them up on the likes on this video, 5,000, and I'll do one of those dances. Check out TikTok for more if you're not sure what I mean. So without further ado, the first watch, going from least expensive, or the most affordable, by the way, all the way up to the most expensive, or the most luxurious, I guess you could put it. This is how it will be sorted. The number one watch here in the list is going to be a Seagull 1963. Now, the Seagull 1963 is a watch that so many collectors have added to their collection, and rightfully so. This is a small chronograph, right? A 38 millimeter chronograph that's going to be column wheel driven. And interestingly enough, there is two main types of chronographs that you'll find mechanical out there in the watch market. You have the column wheel, which is what we see here, and you also have the cam or lever activated chronographs. Now, there's been a lot of debate. Most of it has been dispelled on what kind of chronograph is really better. But the reality is the column wheel chronographs take more hand finishing because of the way that it works. It's more precise in the way that it is actuated compared to the lever, which doesn't need that type of precision. So someone actually has to go and file down kind of the gears of the teeth rather on the column wheel in the chronograph movement, and that takes physical labor to do it for the most part. And oftentimes you only see column wheel chronographs in watches that are very expensive. Now, things have been changing, but we're talking about here with the Seagull 1963 Chinese pilot chronograph of a watch that's only about 300 US dollars. And so that is a phenomenal deal to get a column wheel chronograph with that. It also has the history of the heritage of having the Seagull watch manufacturer. It was named Seagull in the 70s, but prior, the Chinese government had contracted this manufacturer to produce a chronograph for pilots. And to this day, it's become an icon in its own regard. And for a few $100s, it is impossible to find a better watch that's going to have that type of history as well as the column wheel chronograph. And there are so many different versions of this watch as well, different colorways, even larger sizes if someone out there doesn't want the 38 millimeter size, and also combinations of crystal, acrylic, as well as sapphire. So many different options on this watch. If you love this watch, please leave it in the comments below, because I know so many people have added this watch to their collection. Such a great value. Now, this is going to be taking us to the next watch. It's going to be the Seiko Prospex 1959, the first Alpinist 38 millimeter Seiko. The SBDC 149 is my favorite version of this watch, mostly because of the aesthetics. The beautiful green dial, and green is a color driven by watches like the Hulk, which really does add desirability to the watch. Now, setting aside that whole aspect and the desirability, this particular watch is made to resemble the first Seiko watch that is made only for sporting. Seiko had the Alpinist, and this was a watch model under the Laurel moniker for Seiko that obviously came out in 1959. That was made for mountaineers, people that were climbing mountains, mountain climbers, sporting, and it was such a hit that it really led Seiko into develop more sporting watches and watches made for activities. Now, what's interesting about this watch is a few things. One, it has the history, right? It has the history of that connection being a reinterpretation of the original Alpinist, the first sporting watch from Seiko, but also it has good tech, right? It has the 6R35 workhorse movement. This is going to be a rock solid, proven workhorse movement used in so many of the Seiko watches, which in my opinion is really great because we're talking about a watch for about $500. So you really do want this watch to be reliable because it's made to be rugged, durable. It is a sporting watch in the affordable category after all. But also, it just looks nice in my opinion, right? It has the indices that are, some say rumored, if not proven to be actually resembling a mountaintop with the pointed indices. I think it's so cool, vintage inspired, modern tech, wearable, rugged, durable, got the green, a little bit of something for everyone, and at the $500, $550 price point, a little bit less if you find one pre-owned. I think this is a great watch that it's really difficult to beat, especially at this price point. Now, the next watch is going to be a Hamilton Khaki Field 38 automatic. Now, I'll say right away that most watch lists out there, especially when talking about affordable watches, have some variation of the Hamilton Khaki Field watch or one of the other Hamilton Khaki renditions on it, right? This is a segment that Hamilton has focused on so much over the last handful of years, and they have so many different variations. So if this variation we're about to talk about is not the one particularly for you, there are so many out there, especially at different price points, different metals, titanium, you name it. So the Hamilton Khaki Field 38 is such a no-brainer. Now, interestingly enough, along with the Alpinist, this watch is also made for rugged, durable environments, right? This particular watch is so rugged and durable. It's a sporting watch, but if you put it on leather, it can be worn with a suit or something of the like. Now, this watch might actually be a pretty good choice for someone that's a prepper with an office job, right? A little bit rugged, durable, but also, hey, put it on a strap, you can wear it to the office. Now, interestingly enough, at only $500 or thereabout, this comes with the Hamilton H10 movement, which really is a variation of the ETA 2824 movement, a standard off-the-shelf movement. Now, what's so great about this movement and watch is that it's offering an 80-hour power reserve. Now, even the Rolex Submariner does not offer a 80-hour power reserve, and I think that is phenomenal, especially considering the price point, right? Where are you getting a power reserve like that at this price point? A whole nother conversation for a whole nother time of whether or not you actually need that power reserve, but it shows that this watch is a great value and belongs on this list of watches, 38mm, some of the best. Now, rolling on, we have a watch that is a little bit more known to those that are in that kind of sweet spot, I like to call it, of the 38mm, 39mm size watches, right? This is going to be the Omega Speedmaster Reduced. Now, this is not going to be the current Omega Speedmaster coaxial, which some people, in my opinion, improperly are kind of coining the modern Reduced. This is going to be the original Speedmaster Reduced, which came out in the late 1980s, 1988, and was produced all the way up until the early 2000s. Now, this watch I recommend for two people. Two different types of people, right? This is going to be someone that wants the Omega Speedmaster Professional, but they either want it a little bit smaller, right? That 38-ish size case, depending on how you measure it, or it's just a pricing thing, right? Because you can get this watch and it looks just like the Speedmaster Professional, even though it's a smaller case size and even though it does have an automatic movement as opposed to the manual wind movement of the Speedy Pro. This watch is only going to be costing you about $1,600 because you have to buy it pre-owned. You have to buy it on one of your favorite places, including Delray Watch. So really great value, gets you that speedy look, and a great choice for someone looking for that smaller size Speedmaster, but doesn't really want to give up the look of the Speedmaster. Next, we have the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra 38. Now, many people, myself included, consider this one of the best Rolex Oyster Perpetual alternatives. That is such an appropriate classification for this watch. Now, let me explain. There are some things with this watch that make it just phenomenal, and I think that in the future this watch will be more expensive, and it may not be as great of a deal as we find it to be today. And that's one of the major selling points, is that you can get yourself a METAS certified coaxial movement from Omega which is going to beat the chronometer standards set forth by COSC. You can have a display case back that's going to be showing you this coaxial movement that's very finely decorated, much certainly higher than what you'd get from a Rolex AP, a Rolex OP rather, but you can't see the Rolex OP anyway, the movement, so it doesn't really matter, but you get that, so it's a little bit something extra. And in addition, this watch, in my opinion, just is a little bit more busy and adds kind of more of a higher end feel to the dial. Now, I know flat dials have really been in kind of the popularity recently because of things like the Rolex OP, but if you like a little bit more nuanced dial, a little bit more complex dial, the patterns that Omega is putting on these watches really kind of set it a little bit above some of their competitors, in my opinion, a little bit something extra, right? And you can get these now on places like Chrono 24 for about $4,000 US. So I think that's a phenomenal deal considering all the value you're getting present day. Things could change in the future, but today, this is absolutely one of the best. And actually, I'm wearing kind of that watch. I'm wearing the Omega Seamaster Aqua Terra, but 38.5 for the Good Planet Foundation in titanium. So a little bit different, but very similar. So even myself included, I think this is such a no-brainer and one of the best watches that you can buy at 38 millimeters in size. Now, next we have another favorite of mine. This is going to be a Girard Perregaux. This is going to be a Girard Perregaux Laureato 38. Now, if you do like this watch, maybe you've been on the fence, I would recommend buying this watch right away because GP has taken this watch in this size down from their website. I believe it's discontinued. It's just not there any longer. It's not for sale. Authorized dealers that we work with are not able to buy this watch. So I believe this watch is discontinued, which means it's going to dry up. And if you like this 38 millimeter size, this is probably one of the last chances that you can have to buy this watch. Now, why am I recommending this watch? Well, it's such a great value. You get an old world brand, right? Girard Perregaux is one of the oldest standing watch brands in existence. A lot of brands today like to kind of finesse their history, make some things up. GP actually existed in the 1700s, whereas many brands have been around for 10 years and took a name from the 1700s. That's phenomenal. In addition, they hold a lot of their workmanship to the same standards that you get Holy Trinity, right? AP, Patek Philippe. They hold some of the same standards, and the movement decoration exemplifies this. You can look in the display case back and this watch, and you can see the perlage. You can see the angling of the sides of the different plates on the movement. You can see the Côte de Genève decoration through this display case back, and that is something that a sports watch does not need to have. Many sports watches do not have display case backs, and the level that they take it, in my opinion, is just so unneeded that it's nice, right? It's nice to have. You don't need it, but the price that you're paying for this, maybe $7,000 out there on the market, pre-owned today, what else can you get for that that's going to have that attention and level of detail? The dials are phenomenal. The watch I personally owned, and I have a hard time finding a more comfortable wear of a watch at this price point, at this size. Love the GP Laureato 38. Now is probably your last chance. Check out the GP Laureato 38. Now, if you're looking for a dive watch in 38 millimeters in size, a little bit higher end of a dive watch, we're going to be looking at the Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe 38 millimeters. This 38 millimeter size is truly phenomenal. Now, interestingly enough, this features the Blancpain 1150 movement. Now, talking about power reserves again, this has 100 hours of power reserve. I don't know what you would actually need 100 hours of power reserve for in a dive watch unless you went diving every couple of days, I guess, and didn't want to wind it, and then you took it off your wrist immediately and picked it up in a few days. I guess that could be a reason, but it shows kind of the technological advancements that a brand like Blancpain is still willing to put into their watches, whether or not it's intended for diving or sporting or a dress watch or just that horology. So I love to see that. And this is a phenomenal watch. Once again, we've had them in the door at Delray Watch, and it's so difficult for me to find a better dive watch at 38 millimeters than this Blancpain 50 Fathoms Bathyscaphe in 38 millimeters. Now, 38 millimeters can be difficult, especially when you get into some of the higher end sporting watches, right? But luckily enough, AP still has one of their Royal Oak chronographs in 38 millimeters. Now, this is still a very desirable watch, right? There's been a market pullback, but it's still a very desirable watch, and I think it's probably because of this size, right? There are still markets in the world that tend to sell smaller, comparatively, watch size, a little bit better than maybe a US market for a number of reasons, but I think you probably know why. Now, these watches are truly some of the most comfortable integrated sport watch design watches, right? This is Genta designed, though chronograph version, the Royal Oak. And what we see here with this particular model is this very interesting tapering of the bracelet that AP, in my opinion, really has perfected. Now, Girard Perregaux with the Laureato has a very comfortable wear bracelet, but it's not a chronograph. And when you get into the chronographs sometimes, they kind of get a little bit wonky with the way that they sit on the wrist, right? Because you have the pushers, you have the crown, and the way that the movement is designed, it's a little bit off center to kind of compensate for that extra mechanics typically on that side of the watch. And when you wear this watch, and something about the tapering of the bracelet, I just think it is phenomenal. It's buttery smooth, the bracelet on the wrist, and when a watch does that, I absolutely geek out because very few watch brands, in my opinion, have been able to kind of hold the flame against Rolex with the Oyster bracelet. Omega's come close. And with AP and this integrated design, I think they did a phenomenal job tapering that bracelet and making probably one of the most comfortable chronographs in this size that you can possibly get. And the fact that it is 38 millimeters is super difficult to find because today, a lot of people want a Royal Oak that's a little bit larger because they want to show it off, right? So if you get a smaller size, it's a chronograph, this is phenomenal. And of course, it's Audemars Piguet, right? So we're talking a holy trinity watch that does hold some of the highest standards in everything they do, including their sports watches today. Now, next we have a watch that I myself have been considering because I think it is such a phenomenal value, at least at this price point. In terms of all watches out there, not the most approachable and not the best value on the market, but probably for where it will go, if we want to just have fun and speculate a little bit, this is going to be the Patek Philippe Calatrava Pilot Travel Time 7234. Now this comes in an R, a rose gold, as well as a white gold, the G. The R is at the end of the reference for the rose, the G for the white gold, something Patek Philippe does. Now, they do have a larger version of this watch, but the larger version of this watch is actually 42 millimeters, and it's incredibly desirable. This particular watch has been listed different places as a ladies' watch and other places as a men's watch, other places unisex, including from Patek Philippe themselves. And I think it's probably because of this that it's been a little bit alienating to people. I think if they would have come out of the gate right away and maybe put it on kind of a darker colored strap, I think, and market it as a men's watch, they probably could have sold a little bit more. It is a pilot's watch, it's a sporting watch at the end of the day, and that's historically kind of who has purchased these watches. But I think they came out of the gate marketing as a ladies' watch, and maybe that confused some people when they changed. Regardless, you can find these watches out there on the market for about $35,000 US, but the retail is 50. Now tell me, a current gen Patek Philippe pilot watch or any watch kind of that is more than the basic Calatrava that is going to be selling for under retail in the same kind of way as this out there on the market. That's why I think it's phenomenal, but also I think it's a cool watch. I think it's really great. And what's so cool about this is it has 2 time zones, right? It's a travel time, but it also has 2 AM, PM indicator for the travel and the home time, right? So I guess if you travel a ton, you don't use your phone, yeah, you could probably use the function, but just having it in there, it adds a certain level of symmetry to the dial that I really love. What do you guys think about this watch? I'd love to see your opinions, comments below. Should I put this in my collection? And I will throw a caveat. It's technically 37.5 millimeters, but if we round up, it's 38. And as a guilty option, I had to throw it in there because I really do like this watch. And last, I want to have a bit of a bonus throwing this in here, and it's going to be more of a series or collection of watches. This is going to be older FP Journe models in the 38 size. This is going to be the FP Journe Octa line in 38. Some of the watches that perhaps had the brass movements. Now, it's important to note that these watches currently are fetching ultra high premiums. These are investor grade, the auction houses, Christie's, Sotheby's are selling these watches. They're ultra desirable as more of like an art collector item than, just based on the true horological value being offered. But that's for a whole nother conversation for a whole nother time. So unfortunately, these watches are name your price. Still phenomenal watches, but what's so unique and special about these watches that I think really makes it on the list, and something I was thinking about, is that there's something to be said about when you hold one of these older FP Journe watches in this size, the 38 size. It's like, the best way I could describe this is, when you have like a watch, right? You've held a lot of watches. You have a watch. It's like, okay, this is a watch. All the pieces together. Now, getting a little philosophical here, I don't want to lose you, but something about these older Journes, when you hold them, they really kind of feel a little bit more handmade, right? It feels a little bit edgier. It feels almost more like you can kind of sense that all the pieces are put together by man, and it's a product of a human more so than machining done in a factory somewhere. Even if things are done by hand for a lot of brands, they have gotten the precision down so well that it can be indistinguishable oftentimes from a machine. Now, with these older Journes, there's something about it where it just feels like it's done a little bit more hand. There's a little subtle imperfection, and maybe it's a feeling, maybe it's subconscious, I'm not sure, but it's an interesting experience, I think. And if you have a chance, if you go to one of the previews at an auction house or you see one in a store somewhere, I would check out one of the older Journes, because there's something about the depth and how close the hands are to the crystal, that it's super shallow, and it just feels different, right? It feels like someone put this together and it's actually metal and glass, and there's something unique about it. If you've held one of these, you've checked them out, please leave it in the comments below so I don't sound absolutely insane, but that's my opinion. But I want to hear, what are your opinions? Are there any 38mm size watches that perhaps I overlooked, or maybe you enjoy watches a little bit lower than 38 or maybe higher? Some people like the 39. I'd love to see it and hear it. Comments below. Guys, remember, 5,000 likes, I'll do one of those silly TikTok dances, and check me out on my TikTok, The Real John P. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll see you next time. You've been chatting with John P.